Noah had always believed that silence was more than just the absence of sound. For him, silence was protection, a fragile shield built carefully around his life in the dormitory. He was the kind of student who preferred the dim corners of the campus library to the floodlights of a party. He had a part-time job shelving books, cataloging new arrivals, repairing torn spines, and smoothing bent covers. It suited him perfectly. Quiet tasks, quiet hours, quiet people. Noise unsettled him. Crowds exhausted him. He had shaped his days like clockwork. Lectures, library, a meal alone, then retreating to the small dorm room where he could sink into reading until sleep claimed him. That routine shattered the moment Alex moved in. Alex arrived like a storm without warning. He carried his duffel bag as though it were filled with fireworks, and the energy he dragged into the room seemed impossible to contain within four walls. Charismatic, loud, and impossible to ignore, Alex wasn't the kind of person who walked into a place quietly. He announced himself. Within his first weekend, the dorm room that had always smelled faintly of old paper and laundry detergent now pulsed with music, laughter, and a heavy beat of footsteps from strangers who had been invited in. The clash was immediate. Noah sat at his desk, head bent over a philosophy text, pencil in hand. Alex blasted music from a speaker that rattled the thin walls. Noah tried to focus on his notes, but the bass line drowned out his thoughts. He closed the book, exhaled sharply, and looked across the room. Alex, sprawled on his bed, grinned at his phone, thumbs moving fast as he sent invitations to yet another party. "Could you turn down?" Noah asked, voice low but firm. Alex barely looked up. "Relax, man. It's the weekend." That was the first spark, the opening shot in what quickly became a war between silence and chaos. Noah had lived quietly, invisible almost, content to exist in the margins. Alex seemed born to take center stage, to thrive on attention, to demand that every corner of the dormitory echo with his presence. The following Saturday, the tension exploded. Alex hosted his first full-scale dorm party. Strangers poured through the hallways, dragging laughter and the smell of cheap alcohol with them. Music thundered from the speakers. The door to their room swung open and closed constantly as people entered without knocking. For Noah, who sat at his desk trying to prepare for an exam, it was suffocating. His sanctuary had become unrecognizable. The air was thick with voices. His books felt small and fragile against the storm that Alex had unleashed. Noah snapped his notebook shut and stood up. He crossed the room, jaw tight. "This is my room too," he said. Alex leaned against the bed frame, cup in hand, eyes bright. The grin he gave Noah was careless, almost mocking. "And now it's the best room in the dorm. You should thank me." The crowd roared at something Alex said a moment later, but Noah didn't hear it. All he heard was the roaring pulse of music in his veins and the certainty that his world had been invaded. He wasn't just invisible anymore. He was being erased. What followed was a silence, more dangerous than noise. The look in Noah's eyes wasn't anger alone. It was the cold sharpness of someone pushed to his limit. And Alex noticed. For a fraction of a second, his grin faltered. He saw the tension in Noah's clenched fists, the way his voice no longer wavered. But then Alex straightened, lifted his chin, and raised the volume even higher, as though daring Noah to fight him for control of the room. It wasn't just a conflict about music or about a single party. It was a collision of two lives that had never been meant to share the same space. One built on silence and order, the other on chaos and rebellion. The dormitory walls would not contain both without cracking. The question was simple, but dangerous. Who would bend first? Noah, with his desperate grip on quiet, or Alex, with his relentless hunger for noise? The tension thickened with every passing night. Noah's books stacked higher on his desk like a fortress, while Alex's laughter rang louder, spilling into the corridors like wildfire. Two worlds had collided inside a single dorm room, and neither seemed ready to surrender. Noah had tried, in his own quiet way, to build walls between himself and Alex. After the chaos of those first nights, after the endless music and the parades of strangers through their room, he had sworn to keep his distance. He buried himself in work, hiding among the bookshelves, clinging to the idea that order could outlast noise. Yet one afternoon, when he looked up from the circulation desk at the campus library, there was Alex, leaning lazily against the shelf of biographies as though he belonged there. The rebel had invaded his sanctuary. Noah almost didn't believe his eyes. Alex wasn't holding a book. He wasn't pretending to study. He wasn't even whispering the way every other student did. He stood there with his careless smile, tapping his fingers against the spine of a book he hadn't opened. And when Noah frowned in confusion, Alex simply shrugged. "Thought I'd see what you do all day," he said. His voice carried too loudly through the quiet air, and a few students looked up from their desks. Alex lowered his volume only slightly, adding, "Didn't think it'd be this dead. How do you stand it?" Noah's instinct was to tell him to leave, to remind him this was not his place. But something about the way Alex spoke, lighter than his usual swagger, but carrying a strange edge of restlessness, made him pause. He realized Alex wasn't here to mock him. Not really. He was here because he had nowhere else to go. That day, Alex lingered. He didn't touch the books, but he talked. Not about parties, not about jokes or sports or the things that made him so popular in the dorm. Instead, in a tone Noah had never heard before, Alex admitted he sometimes hated the noise he created. He confessed that the nights after the parties ended were the hardest. The silence that came after everyone had left felt unbearable, like a hollow echo pressing against his ribs. He told Noah, without irony, that he was afraid of being alone. Noah listened, at first out of disbelief, then out of something closer to curiosity. This wasn't the Alex he thought he knew. This wasn't the storm that shook their room with bass and laughter. This was someone stripped bare of the performance, someone who leaned too heavily on noise because the silence terrified him. And for the first time, Noah felt the strange shift of recognition. Maybe he wasn't the only one hiding. Over the following weeks, the library became a strange meeting ground. Alex showed up more than once, sometimes tossing a half-hearted excuse. "I'm waiting for someone," or "I needed a place to crash between classes," but he always found his way to Noah's desk. He would slump into a chair, fiddling with pens, or scribbling nonsense on scraps of paper, while Noah worked. And then, inevitably, he would talk again. Not loudly this time, but with a low, confessional tone, words meant only for Noah's ears. He spoke about pressure, about the weight of expectations from people who cheered for him but never really knew him. He admitted he often felt like a fraud, performing confidence he didn't feel. And when he said these things, there was no smirk, no grin to soften the edges. There was just truth, sharp and unpolished. For Noah, each of these moments struck with the force of revelation. All his life, he had been invisible, unnoticed by the crowds that passed him in hallways. Now, here was Alex, the boy who could summon a party with a single text, seeking him out, talking to him, as if Noah were the only one who could understand. It was disarming. It was unsettling. And yet, beneath the unease, it was intoxicating. Back in their shared room, the atmosphere began to change. The music still played, but softer now, as though Alex had learned to test the edges of silence without fear. They no longer filled the air with conflict. Instead, the quiet between them took on a new shape. Noah could sit at his desk while Alex sprawled on his bed, sketching abstract shapes in the margins of his notebook, and the silence was no longer hostile. It hummed with something unspoken, something charged. Noah noticed it most at night. The dormitory would fall still, muffled footsteps retreating down the corridor, laughter dying behind closed doors. In that hush, Noah would glance across the room and see Alex lying awake, eyes open to the ceiling. Sometimes Alex would speak, his voice low enough to almost vanish into the dark. He would admit that he wondered who he would be if he stopped pretending, if he stopped playing the part everyone expected. And Noah, though awkward with words, found himself answering honestly, saying things he had never told another soul. It was a strange connection, fragile and tense, like a thread pulled tight between them. Every conversation seemed to stretch it further, threatening to snap, yet holding firm. Noah, who had always believed silence was his fortress, now discovered it could be a bridge. And Alex, who had always hidden in noise, began to discover that silence, in the right company, could be bearable. The room that once divided them now bound them together. The question that lingered, unspoken, was what this closeness meant, and whether it could survive the eyes of a world waiting outside their door. The night began like every other one of Alex's gatherings, loud and restless, with music pulsing through the thin dormitory walls and laughter spilling into the hallway. Students crowded the room, pressed shoulder to shoulder, drinks in their hands, voices rising above the bass. It was chaos, but a familiar chaos, the kind Alex thrived in. He was the center of it all, flashing smiles, throwing jokes that set the crowd roaring, moving with the confidence of someone who had never once questioned whether he belonged in the spotlight. For everyone else, he was still the king of the dorm, the one who made ordinary weekends feel like events. For Noah, it was a storm he had tried to weather quietly from the corner of the room. At first, he told himself he could ignore it, keep his eyes on the pages of his book even as the walls shook. But eventually Alex noticed him, just as he always did, and crossed the crowded room with the ease of someone walking into his own stage lights. He leaned over Noah's shoulder, voice pitched low, a private tone that cut through the noise as though it were meant for no one else. It wasn't what he said that mattered. Something small, some meaningless joke, but the closeness, the way their shoulders brushed, the way his gaze lingered longer than it should have. And that was when it happened. Someone noticed. It wasn't loud at first, just a voice near the doorway, sharp and mocking, pitched high enough to be heard above the music. "What's this then?" The words carried like sparks in dry air. Heads turned, eyes sharpened. The room, so quick to cheer for Alex, now paused, curious, predatory. The glance between him and Noah had been too clear, the closeness too easy to misinterpret, or perhaps too easy to interpret exactly as it was. The laughter came next, jagged and cruel, and Noah felt the floor shift beneath him. The fortress of secrecy they had built, the library talks, the late-night confessions in the dark, collapsed in an instant. Alex's face changed faster than Noah could process. From warmth to panic, from the ease of quiet closeness to the mask of performance he wore for everyone else. His hand, which had lingered too close to Noah's, dropped away as though burned. Alex straightened, his smile returning, but sharper now, rehearsed, weaponized. "Don't get the wrong idea," he said loudly, so the crowd could hear, so the whispers could be drowned. The room erupted again, half amusement, half suspicion, but Alex had already moved away, already folded himself back into the chaos, already laughing with someone else as if nothing had happened. For Noah, the silence left behind was unbearable. He stood frozen, every sound around him distorted, as though the party had become a blur of noise without meaning. The betrayal wasn't in the words Alex had spoken. It was in the way his eyes had shifted, in the refusal to look back, in the decision to bury everything they had shared beneath a performance for the crowd. Noah realized, with a sick weight in his chest, that Alex feared losing the throne of popularity more than he feared losing him. By morning, the rumors had spread like wildfire through the dormitory. Conversations paused when Noah entered the cafeteria. Whispers followed him down the hallways, snatches of laughter, questions disguised as jokes. "Did you see them? What's going on with those two?" It was relentless, the kind of gossip that clung like smoke, impossible to shake. Alex, once a constant presence at Noah's side, now avoided him. The library chair that had grown used to his careless sprawl remained empty. Their room, once tense but shared in fragile understanding, turned cold. Alex filled the air with noise again. Music, chatter, friends, but none of it was for Noah. The silences they had once discovered together, silences that had felt safe, were gone. Noah felt the weight of it with every passing day. It wasn't just rejection, it was erasure. Alex acted as though the closeness had never existed, as though the late-night talks and the whispered truths had been illusions. And yet Noah knew they had been real. The memory of Alex's voice in the dark, stripped of bravado, was too sharp to dismiss. That was the cruelest part, knowing the truth of someone and then watching them deny it. The betrayal sank deep, cutting more than the whispers of the dorm could. Noah had expected the world to laugh. He had braced himself for the cruelty of strangers. But he had not prepared for Alex, the one who had sought him out, the one who had said he hated pretending, to become the loudest part of the performance. It was a fracture that left him hollow, staring across the room at a boy who could not meet his eyes, realizing that sometimes the person who pulls you into the light is the same one who abandons you in the shadows. The distance between them grew heavier than noise, and though no one said it aloud, everyone seemed to understand. The king of the dorm had chosen his crown, and Noah was left alone with the silence he once thought was safety, but now felt like punishment. The silence between them stretched for weeks, a silence heavier than noise, filling every corner of their shared room like a weight neither dared to move. Alex had mastered avoidance. He left early, came back late, kept the speakers thundering whenever he was inside, so that words could not slip between them. Noah endured it, though every hour felt like the scraping edge of betrayal all over again. The rumors had already done their damage, but Alex's absence was worse. It was not the whispers in the corridors that cut deepest. It was the empty chair in the library, the gap across the room where Alex used to sit, the refusal of his eyes to meet Noah's even once. Noah told himself he should get used to it, that this was the reality now, two strangers forced to share space, living parallel lives that never touched. But just when the distance felt permanent, when he had almost convinced himself that Alex was gone for good, the knock came. Late one night, when the dorm had quieted to its rare stillness, Noah heard it, a hesitant tap at the side of his desk. He looked up and found Alex standing there, no grin, no swagger, no beer cup in hand. Just Alex, stripped of the armor he wore in front of the world. The silence stretched before either spoke. Finally, Alex exhaled, running a hand through his hair as though dragging words out of himself. "I can't keep doing this," he said. His voice wasn't loud, not designed for an audience, but raw, as if it scraped on the way out. Noah's first instinct was disbelief. He had heard too many performances, seen too many masks. But Alex's face was different now. Tired, worn, almost broken. Doing what? Noah asked carefully. Playing him, Alex said, jerking his head toward the door, toward the world beyond it. The rebel. The one who throws parties. The one who laughs the loudest. I don't even know who that is anymore, except someone everyone else expects me to be. I thought if I was loud enough, if I filled the room big enough, nobody would see through me. But it's exhausting. Every day, I wake up and I'm already tired because I know I've got to wear him again. His words fell heavy between them. For once, Noah didn't interrupt, didn't offer reassurance. He let the truth pour out. I hated myself these past weeks, Alex continued, his voice rough. Not because of the rumors. Not because of them. Because of me. Because I pushed you away. Because I turned you into a stranger just to keep my crown. And the sickest part is, it didn't even make me feel safe. It just made me feel empty. Noah's chest tightened, torn between anger and the ache of recognition. Then why did you do it? He asked. Because I was scared, Alex admitted, his voice dropping lower. Scared of losing the only thing I thought made me matter. But I was wrong. The truth is, when I was with you, when it was just us, no noise, no crowd, I wasn't pretending. I was just me, and I didn't hate that version. The words left the air charged, dangerous, impossible to ignore. Noah's heart pounded, not with relief, but with something sharper, more fragile. He wanted to believe, but trust wasn't given back so easily. Still, he saw the crack in Alex's mask, the fracture that had taken weeks to show. So what now? Noah asked, his voice steady but taut. Alex looked at him, eyes fierce with determination that didn't mask fear, but stood alongside it. Now we stop hiding. From them. From each other, from ourselves. I don't care if it's messy. I don't care if it hurts. I'm done performing. I'd rather lose everything than go back to pretending. Noah's instinct was to flinch at the thought, the whispers, the stares, the judgment that would surely follow. But he also felt the shift, the way Alex's words cut through the heaviness of the past weeks. For once, there was no script, no performance. Just a decision. The silence that followed wasn't the suffocating kind anymore. It was sharper, filled with risk, but it carried possibility too. Noah nodded once, slowly. "Then we don't hide," he said. The agreement hung between them like a vow, fragile but unshakable. Outside their room, the dormitory still whispered, still judged, still gossiped. But inside, for the first time in weeks, there was clarity. They would face it together, no matter the cost. And though fear still lingered, it was laced now with something stronger, the dangerous relief of choosing to be real. At first, the change seemed almost invisible, a ripple rather than a storm. Alex still walked the halls of the dormitory, still carried that same sharp-edged charisma that once made crowds bend toward him. But slowly, inevitably, people began to peel away. His closest friends, the ones who had cheered the loudest at his jokes and claimed his parties were legendary, now carried a different tone when they spoke to him. Their laughter had an edge, their questions carried weight, and when Alex didn't answer with the old performance, they shifted uneasily, like an audience denied the show they had come for. By the third week, the gatherings that had once defined every weekend began to thin out. The speakers still worked, the playlist was still saved, but fewer people came. The dormitory, which had once pulsed with Alex's noise, grew quieter, and the absence was noticed. Whispers followed him, some mocking, some confused, some waiting for him to return to the reckless version they preferred. But Alex did not return. He no longer burned himself down to keep the crowd entertained. Noah saw the cost of it. He saw the looks that trailed after Alex in the cafeteria, the hesitation of old friends who now found excuses to sit at other tables. He saw the subtle rejection, not sharp enough to be called cruelty, but constant enough to sting. Alex never admitted how much it hurt, but Noah noticed the way his jaw tightened when certain faces passed by without acknowledgement. The crown had slipped, and the court had turned away. Yet what replaced it was something Alex had never known before, a quiet that was not empty, a silence that did not punish. Their room no longer throbbed with relentless music or hostile silence. Instead, it became something balanced, strange and fragile, but real. Noah could sit at his desk, buried in a book, while Alex sprawled across the bed, tossing a ball from hand to hand, and it felt like coexistence rather than conflict. Sometimes Alex would break the silence with a joke or a thought half-formed, and Noah, without irritation, would answer. Other times, neither of them spoke for hours, and the quiet between them hummed with understanding rather than distance. The contrast was sharp. Outside, the dormitory still whispered, still judged, still clung to its rumors. Inside, they had created something else entirely. It wasn't perfection. Noah still recoiled from chaos, and Alex still longed for bursts of laughter loud enough to shake the air, but they had stopped pretending those differences made them incompatible. Books and noise, silence and fire. They were contradictions, but together they worked. It was not lost on Noah how many people failed to see the value of what had been built. Those who had mocked, those who had judged, those who whispered about the fall of the so-called king. They were left with nothing but the echo of their own voices. They filled their nights with gossip, with hollow laughter, with endless talk of things that never mattered. Their emptiness contrasted so sharply with what Noah and Alex had found that it became almost visible, like a shadow clinging to their faces. For Alex, it was a lesson he carried heavily. The friends who had cheered his loudest moments had little to offer when he chose to be quiet. But in losing them, he found something steadier, Noah's presence, unshaken by the shift. And for Noah, it was a revelation. All his life, he had believed silence kept him safe, but it turned out that shared silence, silence with someone who understood its weight, was far stronger than solitude. It remained different, always would. Noah with his books, stacked high like defenses, Alex with his restless energy that refused to be tamed. But instead of clashing, those differences began to fit together. Balance was not found by erasing who they were, but by holding both truths at once. One quiet, one loud, one searching for peace, the other learning not to fear it. In the end, what mattered was not the approval of the dorm, or the fading echoes of Alex's old reputation. What mattered was the space they had carved out for themselves, a space where masks were no longer necessary. The world outside might never understand it, might keep whispering, but Noah and Alex had stopped asking for its permission. And so the final truth settled quietly between them. They were stronger, not despite their differences, but because of them. Where silence met laughter, where books met chaos, they found not conflict, but strength. And while others clung to emptiness, Noah and Alex walked forward with something far rarer, something real.